Tyler Mays sat quietly in the front row of his AP biology class, just days after Max Wheeler's body was found behind the school gym. No one suspected the smiling, honest student with perfect grades and a spotless record. But as Lena Ortiz vanished, without a trace, and fear gripped the halls of Westbridge High, one truth became chillingly clear. Tyler wasn't the student everyone admired. He was the killer no one saw coming at Westbridge High School. Tyler Mays was the kind of student every parent wished for. He sat in the front row, always raised his hand, and never missed a deadline. Teachers praised his essays, his test scores, ranked among the top in the district, and he even tutored other students who struggled. On paper, Tyler was flawless. He wore clean clothes, smiled politely, and never raised his voice. His parents, Paul and Denise, proudly shared stories of his achievements at neighborhood gatherings. The community of Elmswood, a quiet suburban town where people left their doors unlocked, felt lucky to have a young man like Tyler among them. But what no one realized was that behind his calm eyes and controlled smile was something much darker. Home. Tyler's life was unusually structured. He kept a strict schedule, waking at 5:30 every morning, working out for exactly 45 minutes, and eating the same breakfast every day, plain oatmeal and black coffee. His room looked more like a lab than a teenager's bedroom. Shelves filled with crime novels, anatomy books, and true crime documentaries lined the walls. On his desk, a locked drawer hid something more disturbing: journals filled with graphic descriptions of fictional murders, detailed sketches of weapons, and lists of students' names. Tyler had started writing these stories at age 12, but by 17, they had taken on a more realistic tone. He no longer wrote about imaginary people. Instead, he used real names, classmates, teachers, even neighbors. He justified it as just a way to cope when he felt anxious or overwhelmed. No one ever read them. No one ever suspected a thing. His parents never opened the drawer. They trusted him completely. The school, too, saw no red flags. He was respectful, never involved in fights, and stayed away from troublemakers. Some students thought he was weird, maybe a bit too quiet or intense, but no one thought he was dangerous. He wasn't bullied, nor was he popular. He existed somewhere in between, a shadow that moved through the halls without drawing attention. On October 10th, a sophomore named Max Wheeler didn't come home. His parents assumed he had gone to a friend's house without telling them. But when he didn't show up for school the next day, they called the police. A missing person report was filed, and a search began. Days passed. Flyers went up around town. Teachers made announcements asking students to come forward with any information. Still, nothing. Then, 5 days later, Max's body was found behind the school gym, half covered by wet leaves. A janitor spotted his shoe sticking out from under a bush while doing routine maintenance. The scene shocked even veteran officers. Max hadn't just been killed. He had been posed like something from a horror film. Word spread fast. The school shut down for 2 days. Counselors were brought in. No one knew who could have done something. So calculated, so cold, and yet the killer walked among them, attending class, answering questions, and smiling like he always had. Tyler Mays had begun. The town of Elmswood struggled to make sense of Max Wheeler's death. A sophomore with no known enemies, Max was the kind of kid who blended into the background, friendly, soft-spoken, and never in trouble. The idea that someone had not only killed him but done so with such deliberate cruelty left everyone unsettled. Parents began showing up to drop off and pick up their children. Police cars circled the school throughout the day. Hallways once filled with laughter were now quiet with fear. The investigation began immediately, but leads were scarce. Max had no history of drug use, no signs of abuse at home, and no involvement in anything illegal. His phone was missing. His last known location was the school library, where he had reportedly stayed late to study for a chemistry test. Security. Footage from that day showed him leaving the building just after sunset, walking alone toward the back entrance of the school. After that, nothing. Theories began circulating among students, some wild, others more grounded. A few whispered about a stranger lurking around the school, someone who had followed Maximum, but others pointed fingers at fellow students. One name that quietly came up was Tyler Mays. It started as a murmur, a casual mention in a hallway, then repeated again and again. Tyler and Max had once worked on a group project that ended badly. Some students recalled Tyler losing his temper after Max changed part of their presentation. It seemed small, but in a town desperate for answers, it was enough to raise suspicion. When police visited Westbridge High to follow up, they interviewed dozens of students. Most mentioned Tyler only briefly, describing him as intense, quiet, or hard to read. One anonymous student claimed Tyler had a strange fascination with violent stories. Another said he kept a notebook with disturbing sketches, though no one had actually seen it. Still, these were just words. No evidence. As detectives looked deeper into Tyler's background, they found that he had a spotless record. No fights, no threats, no concerning incidents. But when they subpoenaed the school's computer logs, a different picture began to form. Tyler had accessed forums about criminal psychology and crime scene analysis, far beyond the scope of his school assignments. Some of his recent searches included phrases like how to make a person disappear and fastest way to break a neck. While none of this was illegal on its own, it painted a troubling picture. Authorities decided to pay Tyler a visit. When questioned, he was calm and polite. He admitted to reading true crime and researching for a personal project, insisting it was purely academic. Without any physical evidence linking him to Max's death, there was nothing officers could do. Still, something about his demeanor stayed with them, too composed, too practiced. Meanwhile, Tyler continued his life uninterrupted. He returned to school like nothing had happened, gliding through the hallways with his usual blank expression. Teachers praised his focus. Students gave him space. And somewhere inside his mind, the planning continued. One murder hadn't been enough. For Tyler Mays, it was only the beginning. Just when Elmswood began to settle back into a routine, the nightmare returned. Lena Ortiz, a bright and ambitious junior, vanished without warning. She was last seen leaving the school science lab after staying late to clean up her project materials. Her bike was found the next morning, abandoned near the edge of the woods that bordered the school grounds. Her backpack had been tossed into a nearby creek, contents soaked and scattered. It didn't take long for the town to connect her disappearance to what had happened to Max Wheeler. Lena's parents were frantic. Unlike Max, Lena was known to keep a tight schedule and always kept her phone on. She hadn't messaged anyone, hadn't posted anything on social media, and didn't show up for her weekend volunteer shift at the community center. The similarities were undeniable. Both students had disappeared after staying late at school, both were found days later, and both had no known enemies. 3 days after her disappearance, her body was discovered by a groundskeeper during a routine inspection of an old maintenance shed behind the football field. The door had been partially jammed shut from the outside, hidden by brush and overgrowth. Inside, Lena lay on the cold concrete floor. Her hands were bound with duct tape, her mouth covered, and her body positioned in a way that suggested more than just violence. It was staged. Her eyes were open, staring at the rusted ceiling. Elmswood fell into chaos. 2 dead students within 3 weeks, both under eerily similar circumstances. The local police called in state investigators. FBI profilers began working the case. Schools across the district issued emergency alerts. Parents were terrified. Rumors exploded online. The idea of a serial killer lurking in a suburban high school became more than just a terrifying story. It was now their reality. As investigators dug deeper, they reviewed hundreds of hours of security footage from cameras around the school. One blurry video caught their attention. A shadowy figure in a hoodie walking away from the maintenance shed just hours after Lena's estimated time of death. The footage was too grainy to identify a face, but there was something familiar about the way the figure moved. Detectives compared it to videos from school events, including old footage from the track team's regional championship. One particular video showed Tyler Mays finishing a race, jogging slowly with the same gait, same tilt of the shoulders. It wasn't definitive, but it was enough to put him at the top of the suspect list. When police brought Tyler in for a second round of questioning, he remained composed. He denied knowing Lena well, claimed he had gone straight home that day, and even offered to show them his journal entries as proof of his whereabouts. But his calm nature now felt eerie. It was no longer a sign of discipline. It felt unnatural, even rehearsed. Investigators weren't ready to make an arrest, but they knew one thing with certainty: someone at Westbridge High was hunting. And with each new victim, the killer was growing more confident. The evidence against Tyler Mays began to stack up like pieces in a dark puzzle. After Lena's body was discovered, investigators doubled their efforts to find a connection. They analyzed her schedule, her texts, her social media activity, anything that might point to who could have done this. One thing stood out in her Notes app, a series of brief entries that appeared to be personal thoughts. Most were typical teenage reflections, but one, dated 2 weeks before her disappearance, read, "I feel like someone's watching me in the library. Always the same eyes. Too long. Too still." There was no name, but the library had only a handful of regulars. Tyler Mays was one of them. That single line led detectives back to Tyler's locker. While it had been searched lightly before this time, a full warrant was obtained. Inside, hidden behind a stack of textbooks and notebooks, was something that changed the entire course of the investigation. Lena's small, pink notepad, the one her mother said she always carried. Alongside it was a paper folder containing printed photos, most taken from odd angles around the school, hallways, the library, the science wing. Several photos showed Max and Lena separately, unaware they were being watched. With that discovery, the quiet suspicion turned into certainty. Tyler was no longer just a kid with unusual interests. He was the link. His home was searched next. Investigators combed through every room of the neatly maintained house. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his closet was a locked metal box. When they pried it open, what they found was chilling. A collection of mementos from both victims, a keychain belonging to Max, a bracelet Lena's mother had given her, and pages from a leather-bound notebook titled Phase 3. Inside that notebook were pages outlining methods of manipulation, stalking techniques, and detailed observations of other students. 3 names were circled. Each was accompanied by dates, locations, habits, and perceived weaknesses. They were classmates. All alive, for now, confronted with the evidence, Tyler was taken into custody. He remained calm throughout, barely speaking, showing no emotion. Even as officers led him from his house in handcuffs, he kept his eyes straight ahead. Silent and unshaken. The town of Elmswood watched in stunned disbelief. T school. The news spread quickly. Students cried in hallways. Teachers cancelled lessons. Some refused to believe it was true. Tyler had been in their classrooms, their group projects, their school events. He wasn't a stranger. He was them. Authorities reviewed every written word Tyler had left behind. His journal entries didn't reflect rage or revenge. They reflected calculation. He wrote about control, about watching, about creating fear. For him, it wasn't personal. It was a test, a twisted experiment to see how far he could go before someone noticed. Now they had noticed. But they had come terrifyingly close to being too late. Tyler Mays was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder based on the plans found in his possession. The courtroom was packed on the day of his arraignment. Parents, reporters, classmates, all trying to understand how a boy so respected had become a predator. Tyler appeared in a grey jumpsuit, hands cuffed, his expression blank. He didn't look angry or afraid. He looked satisfied. The trial revealed a side of Tyler that no one had ever seen. Forensic psychologists testified that Tyler displayed classic signs of psychopathy: superficial charm, lack of empathy, and an obsession with control. He wasn't impulsive, and he didn't kill out of passion. He killed to feel power over life and death. The journals he kept weren't just diaries. They were blueprints. Every victim was chosen for a reason. Max had once corrected him in class. Lena had won an award Tyler didn't qualify for. In his mind, they had overshadowed him, and that couldn't be tolerated. Point 1 chilling entry read: eliminate variables. Establish dominance. Watch the chaos unfold. The entries read like scientific observations rather than emotional confessions. He saw people as objects to be measured, controlled, and discarded. When asked if he felt remorse, Tyler simply said, "I don't see the point." The courtroom heard about the elaborate lies he told his parents to cover his late-night movements, how he used GPS blockers to avoid digital footprints, and how he had practiced tying knots and building hiding places in the woods. His behavior wasn't erratic, it was methodical. He had rehearsed. He had waited. He had executed. The defense tried to argue that Tyler was mentally ill, incapable of understanding the full impact of his actions. But the prosecution countered with evidence that he knew exactly what he was doing. His actions weren't the result of a break from reality. They were rooted in a deep and conscious desire to hurt, to control, to destroy without consequence. T took the jury less than 2 hours to return a verdict, guilty on all counts. Tyler Mays was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no reaction when the sentence was read. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He simply nodded. In the weeks following the trial, Elmswood struggled to return to normal. Memorials were held for Max and Lena, and their families called for stronger school safety policies. Westbridge High added more counselors and implemented anonymous reporting tools. Students were encouraged to speak up about anything that made them feel uncomfortable, no matter how small. Tyler's story became a cautionary tale nationwide. Documentaries, podcasts, and books dissected his case, trying to understand how such darkness could hide behind a model student smile. But no answer was ever satisfying. What haunted people the most wasn't just what Tyler did, but how close he came to doing so much more. 3 more names had been on his list. 3 more lives he had already begun to study. They would never know how narrowly they escaped. Tyler never gave a reason. He never apologized. And to this day, he has never spoken a single word about the killings again.